dudes and dudettes. How are you guys? This is Chazzy and welcome back to Cinema Chazzy, the segment on this channel where I review the many movies that I watch across the years, whether they're old or new, classic or modern. Some of those words are synonyms and I insist on saying it because I have this damn intro memorized at this point. And I'm going to be continuing my epic Star Wars saga review. I'm talking about all of the 6 original Star Wars movies, Today I'm going to be covering what is the 5th Star Wars movie, ever made, and also the 2nd chronologically in the Star Wars saga, and also the 2nd in the very beloved prequel trilogy. It's going to be Star Wars Episode 2 Attack of the Clones, which of course, if you guys should know, at this point the Star Wars movies were being released as per like some kind of tradition, they are always released 3 years apart for some reason, so this one came out in 2002 and the story is set 10 years after the Phantom Menace, and now the galaxy is on the brink of civil war because there are certain star systems that are receding from the Republic and going to join the Confederacy of Independent Systems led by Count Dooku, who was once a Jedi himself, you guys know the story. There are a lot of different subplots that connect and interroll with each other, We have, of course, Obi-Wan investigating this assassination attempt on Padme Amidala, who is now a senator, of Naboo. And actually, she was first the queen, now she's a senator, which is very strange. How do you go from being a queen to senator? And then in the 3rd movie, it's like she's a freaking little, I don't know. But anyway, so then there's also that, we have the onslaught of the clone army that is introduced on the planet of Kamino. Everything just falls into place. There is, of course, there are a few different moments too of us being introduced for the first time to the villain Count Dooku, in the movie. A lot of very cool lightsaber sequences, some very cool stuff, However, there is also one of the most controversial moments in all of Star Wars lore, which is the romance between Anakin and Padme, which is very explored, but feels a little strange, Then, of course, the movie literally segues right into Episode 3 later on, But the story is pretty okay. It's actually the beginning of the very famous Clone Wars, There are a number of different events in Star Wars that actually are very central to the plot. One of them is the Clone Wars, the other is the Battle of Yavin in the original trilogy. But still, this actually is a very interesting movie because there were so many special effects. I do believe it is one of the heaviest movies for the special effects in the entire saga, because it was one of the very first movies ever shot completely on a high-definition digital 24-frame camera, which is basically digitally imposing effects onto the screen instead of using the traditional film stock, So there were many shots that were completely CGI. A lot of what the actors did was with blue screens and green screens, which gave the whole thing a very artificial feel. But still, the movie was largely successful. It had an initial budget of $115 million. I believe it's the same as for the Phantom Menace, And although not very successful, it still went on to gross $653 million in total, across all of the merchandising. It is actually the first Star Wars movie to be outgrossed in its year of release, because up until then, the Star Wars movies had been the highest grossing films of the respective years that they came out in, but this one was outgrossed and very quickly, because it came out in 2002, man. What else came out in 2002? The original Spider-Man by Sam Raimi, the Lord of the Rings sequel, The Two Towers, there was also the Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, So I mean, it's really hard for you to compete with these very large-scale movies that grossed so much more money, But still, it did finish as the 4th highest grossing film was old too. So it's not so bad, but still, it could have been a lot better. Before I continue, let's take a look at a clip from the movie before I talk a little bit about the plot.
I will not let this republic be split in two. My negotiations will not fail.
If they do, there aren't enough Jedi to protect the Republic. We're keepers of the peace, not soldiers.
In terms of the story elements, plot-wise, Attack of the Clones has one of the most action-oriented but also cringiest plots around, of the entire original saga, because it gives us the beginning, the blossoming romance between Anakin and Padme, and it all starts off with an assassination attempt on Padme, who's now a senator representing Naboo, her home planet. And then while they're investigating Obi-Wan and Anakin, we see them again. We also see Jar Jar, there's a little happy reunion there after 10 years. So then Anakin immediately has the hots for Padme, and she looks at him like he's a little kid or something. You know, it's actually very cringy. But then once the assassination attempt actually happens, you know, the Jedi start to investigate. One thing leads to another, and they know that there's actually a bounty hunter named Jango Fett who's behind it, you know. And then Obi-Wan goes to the planet of Kamino to try and investigate more, and he discovers a clone army made for the Republic, you know, to aid them in the battle, and which was, of course, it wasn't approved by the Jedi Council, so it just, you know, throws a whole monkey wrench into the whole thing. It starts to get even more mysterious, you know. And then one thing leads to another, you know, and the plot keeps going on, and then Obi-Wan chases Jango, you know. He almost kills him in an asteroid field, and then he goes to Geonosis, you know, he gets trapped there, and then Anakin is assigned to protect Padme on Naboo, and that's when they start to fall for each other, you know. It just gets really freaking crazy from there. And you know, it's just like the dialogue there was like passing a kidney stone. It was really painful, you know, how Anakin and Padme apparently fall in love, you know. It's just, it could have been so much better explored, the script there, you know. And then parallelly, Obi-Wan is captured by Count Dooku on Geonosis, you know. Then Anakin and Padme go to save him, and they get caught themselves, you know. There are quite a few different subplots. We find out that Dooku is apparently pulling the strings here, you know. And then there is a lot less political, you know. There are a lot less political elements in this one here than it was in The Phantom Menace, you know, because The Phantom Menace was very criticized for so many damn subplots related to politics, and it made the movie largely boring, you know. So this one actually really they kind of retconned that by giving us a few more action-oriented sequences, you know. We find out that there's a character named Darth Sidious in the background, you know, apparently pulling the strings and allowing the war to go on and start, so he can actually manipulate events more, you know. He's a character largely shrouded in mystery, you know, but we pretty much already know who it is at this point. So, and then it seems like there is a moment where Jar Jar Binks gives emergency powers to the Chancellor, you know. This is when the Jedi and Padme are on a Geonosis about to be executed in the arena, and by giving the Chancellor emergency powers, he calls upon the army of Kamino to represent the Republic and go to Geonosis and fight off all the battle droids, you know, in a very, very epic final sequence that was freaking awesome, you know. Because basically what happens is that because the movie relies largely on CGI, we are given many more amazing action sequences that no movie up until then, Star Wars related, had done, you know, because it gave the director, you know, George Lucas, and all of the producers much more freedom to do whatever the hell they wanted, you know. So they really took that to heart, you know, especially in the final battle, which is easily the best part of the movie, the climax, when there's hundreds of Jedi and Geonosis, you know, fighting off the Geonosians and also the battle droids and this and that, you know, a lot of lightsaber battles and really cool action sequences with blasters and stuff. And it was really nice finally seeing Mace Windu in action with his purple lightsaber, and then also we see Yoda fighting Count Dooku, you know. Mace Windu, by the way, executes Jango Fett by decapitating him, and that's a little traumatizing for little Boba. I forgot to mention Boba Fett, you know, the very famous bounty hunter who doesn't say a damn word in the original trilogy. He's here as a kid, and he's annoying and stupid and just borderline useless, but he's there. It's the origin of Boba Fett, seeing his dad be killed by a Jedi. So yes, then we see the battle between Yoda and Count Dooku, Master versus his old apprentice, his old Padawan, you know. And of course, Dooku gets the best of Obi-Wan and Anakin, who attack him 2-on-1 and still fail, by the way. It's 2 Jedi against 1, and they still fall to him, and he cuts off Anakin's arm and incapacitates Obi-Wan, and that's when Yoda comes in to save the day. But Dooku escapes, and then he goes to his master like a little puppy, wagging his tail, and says, "Hey, I did good. Do I get a treat? Huh? Do I get one? No? Ah, you suck." Okay, but that's essentially what it is. No, it's setting up the events for episode 3. We do see Anakin and Padme marrying on Naboo, which just has so many bad repercussions. Jedi are not supposed to feel love. Anakin, you're supposed to hate everybody. Well, no, not that, but you can't love anyone. Well, it's not really that harsh either, but still, Anakin did wrong, and Jar Jar is still in this movie, so it's just cringy as all freaking hell, but I still liked it. And before I continue and talk a little bit more about the production and the behind the scenes and whatnot, because there's a lot to get through, let's look at one more clip here. Holy freaking crap, I forgot to mention Anakin's mom. Oh my god, how could I forget about that? That's like one of the central plot points, you know. Anakin is troubled by visions of his mother, Shmi, you know, who he left behind in episode 1. And he eventually goes back to Tatooine, you know, with Padme following him. He discovers that she was taken by Tusken Raiders, you know, because she was sold by Watto. We see Watto again. My tricks don't work, it'd be only money. We see him again. And he tells Anakin that he sold his mom to a guy who freed her and married her, but she was taken by Tusken Raiders. He goes to the Tusken camp, he finds her, and she dies in his arms, so he gets angry, you know, and kills all the Tusken Raiders, and not just the men, but the women and the children too. Yes, and you know, that's actually the beginning of what we would later understand is him, you know, already tapping into his innermost anger and rage, you know, his hatred, and eventually allowing that to take over so he can turn to the dark side in episode 3, you know. But it was brutal. It was brutal, and I can't believe I forgot to mention that. I got so excited that I forgot. But okay, now let's show that clip.
You know I don't like it when you do that.
Sorry, Master. I forgot you don't like flying.
Well, you've lost him.
If you'll excuse me.
I hate it when he does that.
Anakin, don't do anything without first consulting either myself or the Council.
You don't need guidance, Anakin. I see you becoming the greatest of all Jedi.
The boy has exceptional skills.
His abilities have made him arrogant.
Excuse me. I'm in charge of security here, milady.
Now, originally, George Lucas was hesitant to return to the writing desk, you know, to make the script for episode 2 because, well, the response to Phantom Menace was a little mixed, so he was kind of like, I don't know, I'm not exactly sure, I'm not, because it took a long time for the Phantom Menace to gross over $1 billion, you know, so at first he was a little, I don't know, but he eventually decided to bring on a friend, you know, Jonathan Hales, you know, who had very limited writing experience, you know, with theatrical scripts, but he still brought him in anyway, so he started working on the rough drafts and the script, you know, and then started eventually, you know, coming up with the ideas for what would become the plot, you know, and then the final script was actually wrapped up completely, you know, about like maybe a week before principal photography even began. Fun fact, the original working title was, of course you can't take it seriously, but the original working title, like the little in-joke there with the production company, was Jar Jar's Great Adventure, which honestly, if there was ever a Star Wars movie called, you know, Star Wars Jar Jar's Great Adventure, I'm sure nobody would watch it. I definitely wouldn't, you know, like I still haven't seen Solo, a Star Wars story, but still, you know, but of course it was just as a joke for the fan response to Jar Jar in the first movie, you know. So the movie was primarily shot, you know, in a film studio in Sydney, Australia, but there were a few on-location scenes that were shot in Tunisia, Spain, and Italy, you know, especially for the Naboo palace and garden scenes. So it was actually very nice. You know, Naboo is largely European inspired, so, you know, a lot of it was filmed in Spain and Italy, so it actually gave it a very authentic look. But the thing is that the film was, there was also this idea to create, do you remember Lando Calrissian from Empire Strikes Back? The original idea was for him to be a clone, you know, of the army that was actually going to come into place later in episode 2. That was George Lucas's original idea, you know, because it was mentioned by Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Clone Wars and the New Hope, you know, or Ben Kenobi rather. But then he decided to create this whole new story, this whole new mythology around it, you know, like an army of clone shock troopers that came from a certain remote planet, you know, and that's what he was going to be using in the war that followed after that. But the movie invoked so many special effects that it was actually very hard to follow, because there was actually this controversy revolving around filmmakers converting more to digital photography, to digital filmography, you know, and filmmaking rather than the original, you know, tried and tested practical approach, you know. But it worked out pretty well, you know. There were many filmmakers that were for it, you know. But the thing is that there were way too many, you know, instances of different kinds of CGI being used, you know. There was, for example, this thing called this Videomatic, you know, which was done with a household camera. One of the producers actually took a camera to his house and had like his relatives act out certain scenes from the movie, and he would use this technology to create a different background behind him, you know, using kind of like a green screen thing. He would send that to George Lucas to show so he could look at it and approve it, you know. And eventually a lot of it would be fine tweaked to see the final product, you know. So a lot of what we saw was on the cutting room floor. There was even this thing later called animatic, you know, which is basically taking the props and the actors and stuff and kind of, you know, superimposing them digitally to give them a more glossier look so they could look a little more natural with the background, you know. And a lot of it is shown in the final product, especially the Battle of Geonosis, you know, which was pretty much almost 100% digitally animated, you know. And the actors that you actually see were there with the green screen behind them. So very little of what you see is actually, you know, is actually practical effects, especially because Christopher Lee, who played Count Dooku, was 78 at the time, so he couldn't do a lot of the stunts that Count Dooku did, so he actually had a stunt double with his face digitally imposed on it, you know. So that's how it is. Attack of the Clones is basically one big mess of CGI, you know, but still, when it came to Yoda, same thing. They had to take a lot of inspiration from the original Frank Oz puppet in Return of the Jedi, so they kind of made him look very old and store and rigid, you know, but he looked a lot better, you know, than the first time around. So the digital Yoda was really cool. They got Frank Oz to do the voice, you know, so freaking awesome, you know. I really love that there. So, but still, the duel between Yoda and Count Dooku was crazy. It was really hard to make it more dramatic than humorous, you know, but still, because of all of these, the additions of special effects, you know, it gave the Attack of the Clones a very superficial look, you know. You could tell that a lot of the things were fake, but it was still pretty okay, you know. And there were a lot of different storyboards that were actually used, you know, because they wanted to take advantage of the growing technology after the Phantom Menace, you know, so they came up with a lot of different scenes using these, you know. So I actually think it was pretty nice, and I think that it was much easier to film Attack of the Clones than it was the Phantom Menace, because the actors actually had a lot of different, like, it was probably tough for them, because there were many scenes where they had to, like, they were shown the scenes with themselves superimposed there in CGI, so they can kind of get a feel of how they were going to act and react, you know, which is what may have led to a lot of criticism directed towards, for example, Hayden Christensen's acting, you know, because they were working with nothing, man. It's like Michael Jordan in Space Jam. There was nothing there. You were acting by yourself, you know, but still, in the end, I think everything came together to create a pretty good, combination of, you know, different themes and animation and stuff, you know. So I'm gonna talk about the themes later and also the music, you know, but essentially I think that's pretty much it. The production is, there's not too much more information, you know, in regards to Phantom Menace, for example, you know, but there were a few things that were done really well. The stunt doubles, you know, the continuity given to certain characters, you know, and that's pretty much it for that. Let's take a look at one more clip here before I continue and go towards the final stretch and my eventual rating.
To create a clone army.
Wait. We must stop them before they're ready.
Your clones are very impressive.
They'll do their job well.
Blast, that's why I hate flying.
This is a crisis. The Senate must vote the Chancellor emergency powers.
As my first act, I will create a grand army of the Republic.
Now, there are many different themes that are present within Attack of the Clones, you know. Similar to the Phantom Menace, there were a lot of different, you know, converging subplots, but there were many different influences that, you know, made those subplots, you know, emerge and actually interweave with each other. The most notable was, of course, the comparisons between Chancellor Palpatine and Adolf Hitler back in Nazi Germany, you know, because Hitler was given emergency powers just as Palpatine was, you know, and they did, in their own way, rise to power to become genocidal maniacs who were killing innocent people because of their own prejudiced beliefs, you know. But of course, Adolf Hitler was evil on the surface, everybody saw that, but, you know, Palpatine is a little bit more, you can tell that it's under the surface because he's actually the mastermind behind the whole thing, but he kind of disguises that as being a very humble and, you know, non-aggressive political figure who seems to genuinely care and want to help, you know. But we eventually find out in episode 3 that the House of Cards just comes crashing down, and there were a lot of different elements that were used to create the combat sequences, you know, like in the terms of the Battle of Geonosis, you know, they pulled a lot from, you know, war journalism and combat scenes, especially footage of World War II, to create the kind of like the documentary style footage that we saw in the final act in Geonosis, you know, which was very greedy. It really showed how war was, even in the Galactic Republic, you know, all that time away. There are also many references to the American Civil War, because we are in the midst of a galactic civil war in Attack of the Clones, so that's where it comes from as well. So really crazy. The political background isn't that strong in this one as it was in the previous, but it is still pretty okay, you know. So, you know, there was even these little shakes, like handheld shakes that were added to the, you know, the Geonosis sequences, you know, to kind of give it like that, you know, that feeling of actually being there, you know. Even the CGI sequences had that camera shake, you know, which were digitally added. And there are a few other references as well, you know, because the Star Wars movies, they all kind of connect to each other. So the prequel trilogy kind of mirrors the original trilogy, you know, and Attack of the Clones is the middle film of a trilogy, just like Empire Strikes Back. So there are references there, you know, like for example, in the middle of the film there is a chase through an asteroid field, and the same way that Obi-Wan escapes Jango Fett's radar by attaching to a meteor, Han Solo did the same thing back in the original by actually attaching himself to the back of a Star Destroyer, so, you know, the Empire wouldn't detect him. But of course Boba Fett knows and he follows him. This is actually retcon later, you know, because it's said that Boba Fett learned from his mistake in episode 2. He saw what his father Jango Fett did and how he didn't see Obi-Wan anymore, so he actually learned from that, and that's why he was able to anticipate what Han Solo did and then track the Millennium Falcon. You know, it was actually really cool. You know, everything rhymes, man. It's poetry. It's like George Lucas said, you know. So, you know, there are quite a few different other themes. Like the phrase "I have a bad feeling about this" is present in all of the Star Wars movies, and also they kind of rhyme in that sense as well. That's pretty much how it is. It's one long poem that rhymes, you know, the words of George Lucas himself, you know. So yes, you know, there's a lightsaber duel that almost always occurs over a pit, a few other things, you know. So now I'm going to talk about the cast. We have, of course, Ewan McGregor playing Obi-Wan Kenobi, reprising his role from Episode 1, but now a little bit more bearded, you know, but with longer hair. He is now a Jedi Knight, you know, but he also serves as kind of like he's a knight, but also the mentor to Anakin, so he's kind of like a Jedi Master in a way, you know. They have kind of like a budding, frustrated father and growing son relationship, you know, but he does mature a lot more. We have, of course, Hayden Christensen playing Anakin Skywalker, you know, who is I believe he was 19 when he was cast. It's his first role in a Star Wars movie, you know, so yeah, man, it's a lot of pressure for the kid, you know, but still, a lot of the criticism was directed towards his acting, you know, but still, I can understand. He was given kind of a bad rep, you know, but still pretty okay seeing Anakin developing from a Jedi Padawan, slowly growing more and falling in love. Speaking of falling in love, Natalie Portman as Padme Amidala, you know, his love interest, and also the senator of Naboo, and everybody's trying to kill the poor woman, you know, and she's just trying to survive and live and falls in love with Anakin despite everything telling her not to, you know. So yes, pretty okay. Then we have Ian McDiarmid as Palpatine, and also Darth Sidious, who is the Sith Lord, who is controlling everything and manipulating everything like everything is his puppet, you know, which is very, very interesting. It's a very good dynamic to play around with, you know, at least in my opinion, and very nice fleshed out character. We have now Samuel L. Jackson playing Mace Windu, who also was in the first movie, but to a lesser extent, you know, but here we actually see him engaging, interacting, and using a lightsaber, you know. He actually requested a purple lightsaber specifically for his character, so he could see his character on screen, you know, because lightsabers were always blue or green for the good guys or red for the bad guys, you know, but George Lucas, you know, made the exception and gave him his purple one, you know. Then we have Christopher Lee as Count Dooku, and also Darth Tyrannus, you know, who was kind of like a former Jedi who became an evil political figure, you know, in the CIS and controls everybody, you know, and he is the apprentice to Darth Sidious, so played by very well character there. Then we have, of course, Anthony Daniels as C-3PO, you know, the only actor besides Kenny Baker, I think, to play his character in every single Star Wars movie. I hate these guys so much. So yes, he was there in a better extent now. Kenny Baker as R2-D2, also I believe one of the actors who was in every single Star Wars movie up until that point, you know. Then we also had Frank Oz as the voice of Yoda. So, you know, just the voice because he was CGI. So yes, wow. I'm out of breath here. I've been just sharing so much information. Holy freaking crap, man. All in all, guys, it's not a bad movie, you know. I actually consider it to be, you know, considerably superior, you know, to The Phantom Menace. You know, it was much better, so of course my rating is going to be a little higher, you know. I would say that Attack of the Clones can go home with a 9 out of 10. That is the rating that I'm going to give to it. It wasn't perfect, you know, but not all the way to 10, you know. That's actually going to be reserved for another movie in the saga, you know. But I did like it a lot, you know, despite there being, it seemed like there was more CGI than actual real essence and story, but it was still very enjoyable. A lot of the praise was directed to the emphasis on action, you know, and also the musical score, which was of course by John Williams and the London Symphony Orchestra. They redid the Imperial March from The Empire Strikes Back. They kind of made it a little bit more modern, you know. There are a lot of really cool, you know, soundtracks, you know, a lot of really awesome songs that played there, you know. Star Wars has a very timeless soundtrack. You can listen to anything in Star Wars and feel like it was, you know, I don't know, it transports you to a galaxy far, far away, you know. So I think it was really good in that degree as well. The costume design was awesome as well. The performances by some of the actors was good, especially Ewan as Obi-Wan and Natalie as Padme. Anakin wasn't too good. I was gonna say Anakin wasn't too good as Hayden. Hayden wasn't too good as Anakin, but still, I can understand why. It was a lot of pressure, you know. It was a lot on his plate, you know. But Ian was very good as Palpatine as well. So everything just came together. But there was, of course, the criticism that I agree with, you know, with some other things like the screenplay itself kind of felt a little bland. The romantic scenes were very, very cringy and just felt childish at best, you know. It was very forced. Like Han and Leia fell in love naturally because they were kind of at each other's throats. Leia pretty much outright hated him, you know, called him a scoundrel, but they fell in love despite the circumstances, you know, and it became very strong and lasted an entire lifetime. Whereas with Padme and Anakin, it felt like forced and rushed, you know. It just was really weird, you know. The pacing was also off. There was a very long runtime, you know. This movie, for some reason, was 142 minutes long. That's over 2 hours, and there's no reason for it to be over 2 hours, you know. The characters were largely underdeveloped, you know, but still, it doesn't take away from the fact that it's very nostalgic to me. I was becoming a fan of Star Wars at the time, you know, so I actually really enjoyed. I love the action sequences, you know, and it is one of my favorite movies in the original saga, so I am still going to give it a 9 without looking back. I don't have any regrets, and if you don't agree, well, I'm going to force lightning your ass. Anyway, guys, that's it. This one is a little bit longer than the other reviews because there was a lot to unpack here, you know, with the CGI and stuff, but I think it came out okay. Let me know what you guys think, you know, and hopefully the next one won't be as long, but it's going to be the final one, wrapping up this entire Star Wars saga review here. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this, and if you happen to like this review, go ahead and give this video a like, and also subscribe to my channel because I release videos every single day, and while you're at it, hit the notification bell too so I can know exactly what time I upload it. It's all good, guys. It's all good. The force is strong with the Cinema Chazzy playlist lately. It's just gonna get better. I'm almost done with Star Wars Battlefront 2 at this point. That's gonna be bittersweet. But anyway, guys, that's it. This is Chazzy signing out for now, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Roll the final clip and then the outro screen.
Begun this Clone War has.